I do think our laws endeavor to legislate decency to some degree. Um, I think that's in fact what law is based on, is the premise of fairness. That's why Lady Justice is blind and she's balancing scales. That's the whole premise of what law is supposed to endeavor to do. Whether or not it gets there largely isn't about. Again, this is why I always sort of tense at the word revolution, right? People talk about revolutions and the need for revolutions. Um, I say revolutions are absolutely necessary in the instance that your laws do not facilitate fairness. But in the event that the laws are already there, so on the books say justice is real. The books say fairness is the basic starting point for all sort of disputes and these sorts of things. Then this isn't. I don't think it's a question of we're not looking for revolutions, right? We're looking for human beings to internalize what's already been written into the books, which is to say, this idea, this concept of fairness. Have we internalized these things, or do we fall back on things like our privileges and our biases in order to get through life? Which is, I think, what most people actually do, right? Most people don't necessarily internalize fairness or justice or respect, but they fall back on the the benefits they get from their class associations or the race associations or the status associations. And can you expect anything less from humans or anything other? Um, Traditionally, no. Traditionally, no. But one of the things that we do have going for us as a society is that we do endeavor to create these laws. In the instances where we have these discrepancies between what actually happened and what we've agreed as a society should happen, then you can refer to the laws and you can point to the laws and say, no, 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 you are in the wrong because this, and I basing my this conflict and you know my claim on this stipulation, on this statute, and hence we have a legal system. Now, um, so that's sort of, I think, how we manage these disputes and how we manage these discrepancies, largely. But even that, I think, to a large degree, has to do with status and still has to do with how much, not just competency, but how much uh, uh, comfort and access you have to legislation as a recourse. And I think a lot of us don't have access to things like that in normative ways, that you would feel comfortable and you wouldn't feel like on some level you might be disadvantaged by uh, the legal system, particularly in this climate. Now, all of that being said, again, in the blue pill world, I think it's fairly straightforward. And what I mean by that is, on the surface, I think these things are fairly straightforward. But I think the problem that we're faced with in real terms is the fact that in reality, like that at the root of all things is the fact that uh, there is a distinction and a separation between the laws and the way we actually operate. And how you address that, how you get at that, I'm not sure. I mean, people can call for revolution and say, uh, um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I think to me, I think the revolution is one of the heart and one of consciousness. I don't know that it's a revolution of guns and blood and these sorts of things. I think it's a revolution of consciousness. It's a revolution of the human heart, and it's a willingness to do that level of investigation. Um, and I think that's an exercise in language. I think that's an exercise in um, narrative. Language and narrative are the keys to this level of revolution. Um, so so that's just sort of how I think about this these days. Uh, I don't I think it's subtle. I think it's a subtle thing. I don't think that this is uh, I don't think that this is about the screaming and the tantrums and the you know you know I mean, you can use your fist, but your fist is your words. Your fist is your imagination. Your venom is in your articulation. It's in language. you know it's a quality of pied pipering that brings people to your point of view, I think. And so it's a revelation. It's a not sorry, not a revelation, but a revolution um, of heart. I think it's a different kind of revolution that we're talking about. In the world, you see this democratization of information that's been happening over the last century. And we've gone from the industrial and the linear into the digital and the exponential, right? And here we are, I think, on the precipice of a new age, and and we are called on, I think, to become. And I don't think that this is, and I think this is of profound importance. This idea of language and narrative, right? That the revolution isn't. I mean, maybe in some parts, in some aspects, there's still work to be done in terms of our legislation and these sorts of things. But I really think this is about narratives. I really think this is about language. I really think it's about prying open the human heart so that we really understand each other at the core, right? I mean, if you have a hard time respecting somebody you've never met before, don't you think that that's something to analyze and to think about and to look at in yourself really deeply? Because I would think that that is at the minimum where we start as a society. If we hope to work, we start as a society where I can look at you as a human being, and with that simple, sweep of the surface, have a certain level of respect that carries me through the first 7 seconds that we meet each other, and then the first 7 minutes, and then the first 7 years, right? And if I can't muster that in myself, then does that not indicate a real problem for us as a people and for me as an individual? If a basic modicum of respect is a difficult thing to call on, that to me, that's shocking to me. That's shocking to me to think that, to hear that, to even entertain the idea. And I mean, not to say that I haven't been disrespected by people I've never met before, because certainly I have. But I've always thought of that as aberrant. I've always thought of that as, you know, um, strange, a one off. That's not normal. That's not normative. Normally, you go into the world and people are people. You don't become best friends. You don't hold hands. You don't sing kumbaya. But, there's an exchange of acknowledgement, this is a human being, and I'm interacting with a human being, and they're interacting with a human being, and you feel as though, there's some basic sense of respect exchanged. So, um, if that is not something that I can expect or that other people can expect, then perhaps we're not talking about the laws, we're not talking about legislation, we're not talking about policies. Perhaps what we're talking about is human beings and what we carry around in our hearts and in our minds, and the assumptions that go with that, and the things that we take for granted. I mean, maybe I do need an education in the sense that I need to understand that most people don't. I mean, most people don't like me. That may in fact be true, but I mean, I'm not. But my point is that maybe, my naivete may be that, where I think that we are a bunch of people who were primed on the basic notion of do unto others and the golden rule and these things. And I'm thinking we're all walking around with at least that basic program running. I'm thinking that. Meanwhile, 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 that's not what's happening at all. okay, if that's the case, then okay, maybe there is cause for the burn down the thing and and raise hell, and okay, if that's the education that I need to have about life, then okay, then that's I mean, you know, but and I mean, I don't know who decides these things. I don't know who declares these things. I mean, according to Jordan Peterson, you people don't um, deserve respect. And again, I think this is varying degrees. I mean, I don't think that you deserve respect as in you deserve to be worshipped and acknowledged. And I've never met you before. Like, I've never met you before, but lo and behold, I fall to my knees and praise. No, I mean, that's ridiculous, But like, I always think, well, not always, but in this particular case, you're dealing with a stranger. We're talking about a one-to-one situation here. The criteria is a very simple equation, right? I don't know anything about you, so I'm not going to assume, horrible things. I'm not going to assume great things. I'm going to assume that I'm speaking to a human being who's complicated, who's done good things, who's done bad things, and who, if this exchange develops into something, I want to bring to this exchange the opportunity for it to develop into good things, right? I don't know if that's crazy, but that's how I approach things. That's how I think about life. I know lots of people who've done bad things in their past, right? And they're not horrible people, but they've done some crazy shit. I know people like that, you know. I know. I mean, we're all like that. We're all like that, So I don't. I'm not like I don't. Like I'm like I don't. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe what he's indicating in this perspective is this idea that in fact human beings are not prone to respect. That they are not programmed to be respectful. And in which case, then I think that that screams of something profoundly uh, broken in the human heart. I mean, is it unfixable? I don't know. I don't know. But if it really is a difficult thing for a human being to simply be in the presence of another human being and bring to that presence a basic modicum of respect, then there is a deep, deep um, fissure in the human soul, because that makes no sense to me. None. So it's an interesting question. It's an interesting question. I'd love to know on a real level how people feel about that. Do you feel, first of all, as an individual, when you confront or you meet an individual, do you bring that sense of, do unto others, the golden rule, decency? Do you bring that to the moment yourself? And do you feel acknowledged in that same way? I'd be curious to know, how pervasive is this idea that respect is elusive, that respect is something that is only earned and not something that's born out of simply being a human being. I certainly believe that there is respect that you do earn. Respect for your colleagues, respect that you get from your work, respect that you get from your status, these things that you gain over time. But if I don't know you from Adam and I meet you, I think, don't I start from a place of your human being? And that onto itself is deserving of a consideration, that I don't simply shit all over your existence. I don't disrespect you. I don't, you know, because that's not what I would want you to do to me. That's a really basic, to me, level of respect. I think respect starts there. The point is this question, do you go into the world with this sense of seeing a human being for a human being, and something um, uh, comes from that, a certain level of respect emanates from that understanding and that consideration? Or is that crazy? Is that naive? Do you think that it's not about that? Like, there is no basic respect that's offered to people? I think that's a really good question. I'm of the camp of the do unto others camp. And I'm not saying that as a Christian per se. I just think that's a really rational way to think of the world and to treat the world, and a type of attitude that I myself would feel compelled to nurture in myself and in others. But I mean, truth be told, I have been disrespected. So that's happened, that, and so it does happen. So I'm wondering who is more represented in the population, the people who bring that sense of do unto others, or is it this other um, philosophy that says, you don't get my respect until you earn it, right? And until you get that respect, you don't I don't really have to give you anything that indicates that respect. Very curious to know that. That's an interesting question.